Christians do not sin, and Christians cannot sin because Christians have been delivered from their old life of sin and shame and are walking in holiness and righteousness all the days of this present life. However, just because you call yourself a Christian does not make you a Christian. The vast majority of the people who claim Christ are still sinners LARPing as Christians. They are false prophets, denominational wolves, false brethren, because brethren does not mean Christian. Hebrews 3:12 says, "Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief, in departing from the living God." So I don't care how bad your theology is, even the most milquetoast of once saved, always saved and hyper-grace heretics would acknowledge that if you have an evil heart of unbelief, you are not a Christian. And yet he's addressing the audience as brethren. Because brethren does not mean Christian. It can mean your literal brother, it can just mean your fellow man, or in this case, it can mean your fellow Jew, Hebrew. Because epistles are written to bodies of people, not all of whom have been converted yet. Just because Paul or John or whoever else is writing to a church, they're not making some statement that everybody who they're writing to is born again. It should be so painfully obvious it boggles my mind that I have to say this. But that lie will damn billions because so many heresies are built upon this lie that just because an epistle is written to a body of people, they're all Christians. Absolutely not. One of the main functions of epistles is rebuking them and correcting them because they're not all actual brethren yet. In the case of 1 Corinthians, he's even telling them to kick one of them out of the church, the man who's sleeping with his father's wife in chapter 5. Now in 2 Corinthians 11:26, Paul says, "In journeyings often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils by mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren." This phrase, false brethren, is crucial to understand. False brethren are anybody who calls themselves a Christian but still commits sin. Because brethren does not mean fellow Christian. They may be false, which frankly should be plainly obvious. Galatians 2:4 says, "And that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in privily to spy out our liberty which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage." This is the second and only other appearance of this phrase, false brethren. Because again, just because you call yourself a Christian doesn't mean you're a Christian. If you're still sinning, you're false. And of course, this situation in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 that I referenced earlier is critical if you're going to understand this concept. Verse 9, "I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators. Yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world. But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, with such a one no not to eat." Any man that is called a brother, somebody who's claiming Christ, somebody who's going to your church. If they're still in sin, we're not even supposed to be eating with you, because we are not going to accept your state of sin and call you a brother in Christ. "For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do not ye judge them that are within?" Christians are absolutely not supposed to be judging atheists or pagans or Muslims or Jews. We are supposed to be judging the fruit of people who go to church, people who claim Christ, people who call themselves Christians. And if they're still in open sin, we're supposed to kick you out of the church because you're not actual brethren yet. As Paul goes on to say, "But them that are without, God judgeth. Therefore put away from among yourselves that wicked person." Paul literally commands the church at Corinth to kick out the member who's still in open sin, sleeping with his father's wife. Because he's still a wicked person. He's still a sinner. He's false brethren. James 5:9 says, "Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door." So he's calling the audience brethren, but acknowledging the possibility they could be condemned. But Romans 8:1 says, "There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit." So if you're actually a Christian, there's no more condemnation, because you're no longer sinning. So if there's a possibility you could still be condemned, that means you're not a Christian. Because brethren does not mean Christian. In the case of the book of James, it means the 12 tribes scattered abroad, fellow Jews. They may be claiming Christ, but they're still working out their salvation with fear and trembling, because just because you call yourself a Christian doesn't make you one. Actual Christians have no condemnation. And knowing that brethren does not mean fellow Christian is how you can rightly divide the rest of the book of James. Verse 3:1, My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. So plenty of religious sinners will twist this passage out of context to defend the lie that actual Christians can still commit sin. We still offend all. But they don't read the rest of the verse. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. So why would he even say this if nobody is perfect? The truth is, actual Christians are perfect. For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. For the law made nothing perfect, but the bringing in of a better hope did, by the which we draw nigh unto God. Jesus Christ literally commands perfection, and Christians keep his commandments. So when James says, in many things we offend all, that's a non-inclusive we. He's not including himself. Because the apostles setting up the early churches were perfect. And this is how you can understand the end of the book of James as well. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Sinners try to twist this verse out of context and say that Christians still commit sin because we're supposed to confess our faults one to another. And of course, when they say that to me, I say, okay, well, confess your faults to me. For some reason, they never do. And they certainly don't read the second half of the verse. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. These sinners also try to claim that there is none righteous, no, not one. So who is this righteous man it's talking about if there's none righteous, no, not one? Actual Christians who are as righteous as Jesus. Little children, let no man deceive you. He that doeth righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. Christians are as righteous as Jesus. So yeah, if you're calling yourself a Christian but you're still committing sin, you need to confess your faults one to another. Though my sins were red as scarlet, they are now white as snow. I can tell you every single sin I ever committed, because the sinner who committed them passed away over 3 years ago. Christians don't have shame. Whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. And James goes on to say, Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins. So again, brethren does not mean Christian, because he says, Brethren, if any of you do err, and err means sin. And if you sin, you haven't been converted yet. Conversion is once and for all. That's when you go from darkness to light, from a sinner to a saint. You don't get converted multiple times. And if the sinner has not been converted, then he will receive death, the lake of fire. And this is how you can understand 1 John 5:16. If any man see his brother sin a sin which is not unto death, he shall ask, and he shall give him life for them that sin not unto death. There is a sin unto death. I do not say that he shall pray for it. This brother is not a fellow Christian. Because literally 2 verses later it says, We know that whosoever is born of God sinneth not, but he that is begotten of God keepeth himself, and that wicked one toucheth him not. Just because you're called a brother doesn't mean you're a fellow Christian. The sin unto death is the last sin you commit before you pass away. We're not supposed to pray for that. But if you're still alive and breathing, we can pray for it. We can pray that you receive the good news and come on into the kingdom. There's no more chances after you pass away. And this is also how you can understand Galatians 6:1. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. If a man be overtaken in a fault, not a fellow Christian, because Christians do not sin and Christians cannot sin. Ye which are spiritual, restore such a one. Which is literally what happens in 2 Corinthians. The church at Corinth restored the man who was sleeping with his father's wife because he was repentant of his sin. He hadn't been born again in the first place, he was just restored to the church. And this is also how you can understand Matthew 18. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. Brother does not mean fellow Christian, because actual Christians do not trespass. Actual Christians do not sin. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Brother does not mean fellow Christian. It just means fellow man, your literal brother, or your fellow Jew. Because whosoever is born of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin, because he is born of God. Actual Christians do not sin and cannot sin. Actual Christians go and sin no more.